It is working. Good evening, everyone. I'm Misha Glenny. I am the rector of the Institute for Human Sciences here in Vienna, and this is the first time that I'm introducing this ceremony, but it's the third time that the ceremony has been held here. So I want to extend a very warm welcome to all of you who've come here this evening, but a special welcome, of course, goes to Mika Fellow, Jacqueline van der Poel, and Petra Meyer, the executive board of the FLAX Foundation, without whom none of this would be happening. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your continuing collaboration with the EVM. Now, the Institute for Human Sciences is really very proud to host the Emma Goldman Awards. This, as I said, for the first time, but we're also equally proud to have hosted 4 Emma Goldman fellows, including Annalise Kaiser Trujillo here in September 2022. We are, of course, facing very difficult times at the moment, times scarred by war, by rising living costs and political instability. And it's easy in these continuing dramas to lose sight of the issues of inequality and social injustice, issues and problems that permeate our society. Recognizing this is an important first step in finding ways in which we can decrease inequality, in which we can combat inequality. But the necessary second step is the study of injustice and inequality, of how economic possibilities shift or indeed preclude people, of how sex and gender intersect with issues around access to work. And in this context, the FLAX Foundation has done a wonderful job of highlighting researchers who dedicate their academic work to these very issues, and of course of supporting their endeavors with both generosity and leadership. The generation of knowledge about our societies, the creation of networks where academic research can flourish, is of course central to the very mission of the EVM, and we are proud to share these values with our partner institution, the FLAX Foundation. But I am now going to hand over the floor first to Mika, and then we will hear from Sara Garbagnoli and Asli Vatansever, who will offer us some reflections on feminism, social movements, labour and academic freedom. Sara Garbagnoli's talk is entitled Feminists as Givers of Oxygen, Monique Wittig, a Remarkable Example, whereas Asli Vatansever's contribution is called This is the Closest I'll Ever Get to Being the Next Marx, or How Exile Makes You Funnier. So I look forward to that. I'm looking forward to listening to them both, of course. And after the speeches, we will proceed to the award ceremony itself, when the Emma Goldman Awards and Snowball Awards will be conferred. So if I can first of all say thank you for coming and invite... Oh, Mika, you come and say a word first.
I do it with this microphone. So I'm sure you will have a great time. I'm sure of that because we have 2 wonderful speakers, not just with wonderful titles, but they have wonderful titles. So I will let them speak. And then I'll present, on behalf of the foundation, I'll present lucky ones from this year and the Snowball Awards that have been nominated and then given the award by the foundation as well. So I think that's all. Oh yeah, I'm continuously losing pens, no? I'm stealing them again some other place. So yeah, I think I will shortly introduce the foundation after that, but we have a website, you can look at that. So I think I will leave it at this, because I'm wondering, we need more oxygen, don't we? No, okay.
I thank very much the Institute for Human Sciences, the rector, Misha Glenny, and the FLAX Foundation for the invitation. I am extremely honored and very happy to have the privilege of speaking at this third Emma Goldman Awards ceremony, in which, as for the past 2 years, we celebrate astonishing researchers, activists, and artists. I'm deeply proud to be part of the feminist and queer network that has been created by the FLAX Foundation. It is a real excitement to me, since feminist and queer theories changed my life, and for the better. I was a non-straight child, as I guess some of us, and I was aware of my queerness very early, as perhaps some of you. This awareness was for me a source of fear, of loneliness and shame. I felt suffocated and I wanted to suffocate myself. We all know the statistics of queer young people who consider committing suicide. The percentages are 3 to 5 times higher than for their heterosexual peers. But I was lucky, I survived. My oxygen came back slowly, first through literature, thanks to a handful of queer authors that I managed to hook in the ocean of straight books. Sappho, Wilde, Woolf. We all know them by heart. Then more oxygen came through when I discovered feminist and queer theories. These theories allowed me to understand that the distress over being a woman, a lesbian, a queer, but also for non-white people being a racialized person in a patriarchal, heteronormative, racist world is not an individual matter, but the consequence of interlocked systems of oppression, sexism, heteronormativity, racism. Oxygen burst from reading Audre Lorde, African, Caribbean, American lesbian feminist, theorist and poet, who in her collection of essays, Sister Outsider, published in 1984, conveys that for oppressed groups, writing is not a luxury, but a question of survival. Oxygen continued to flow as I read Black feminist theorist Bell Hooks, who, in her Teaching to Transgress, published in 1994, wrote that feminist theories was first and foremost a place of healing. For me, the Emma Goldman Award and the entire work of the FLAX Foundation are a stunning extension of this idea. Feminist and queer theories and analysis provide us with oxygens in order to breathe better. They allow us to have the tools, again I quote Audre Lorde, to transform our silence into language and action. And yes, we do need new tools in order to speak about the oppression we suffer, because, as Lorde remarkably put it, the master's house can't be dismantled if we use the master's tool. A few weeks ago, Professor Mika invited me to give a speech today. She suggested I speak about the work of feminist and lesbian activist, theorist and writer Monique Wittig. She could not have given me a more delightful gift. With no doubt, Monique Wittig, alongside with Audre Lorde and Bell Hooks, is one of the most generous feminist theorists and writers who continues to give us, women, non-straight people, racialized people, this necessary oxygen in order to communicate our experience of marginalized groups and to theorize this marginalization in order to have the tools for dismantle it. Born in France in 1935, Monique Wittig revolutionized the 20th century political, philosophical, and literary fields. She substantially contributed to the emergence of feminist and LGBT plus and queer studies. Almost 20 years after her death, in January 2003, I would like to celebrate the radicality of her thought and her capacity to feed our analysis and our struggles. As a militant, Wittig was one of the founders of the women liberation movement in France. She wrote the first text, founded the first non-mixed group, lesbian and feminist, and organized the first powerful political actions. In August 1970, with the 8 other French women, she set up to lay a bouquet of flowers at the foot at the Arc de Triomphe at the end of the Champs-Élysées in Paris, close to the unknown soldier's grave. One of the banner's slogans said, "There is one person more unknown than the unknown soldier, his wife." As a self-proclaimed materialist lesbian theorist, Wittig made her lesbianism the key to theorizing the functioning of heterosexuality, considered not as a specific form of sexual orientation, but as a political totalitarian regime in which men and women are supposed to be natural groups. Totalitarian since it impregnates every material, symbolic and linguistic aspect of our life. Wittig's theoretical position is characterized by a radically anti-essentialist view concerning the status of the sex groups. For Wittig, men and women are neither natural nor eternal groups, but naturalized socio-economic antagonist classes, as she explained in The Straight Mind and Other Essays, a collection of texts published in 1992. It is a given social relationship of subordination and otherization of women and non-straight people by men and straight people that creates the two sexes. The category man and woman would not exist before and independently of the social relationships. Hence, in Wittig's perspective, sex is not a natural fact, but a political category which would be socially irrelevant if there were no subordination of women by men and of non-straight people by straight people. What we call anatomical sex would be socially irrelevant for distinguishing among individuals, like foot size or hair color are. In her essays, Wittig explained how men and women are fabricated by means of a vast and powerful system of social structures. Among them, primary socialization, family and school education, domestic work, obligation for women to care for weaker individuals within the family or within the society, appropriation of women's time, women's special confinement, asymmetrical functioning of the labor market, systemic use of violence by men, from insult to murder, to subjugate or just to intimidate each woman. From cradle to grave, and even before cradle and after grave, women are subordinated in very different ways according to the position they occupy in the social hierarchy, but still subordinated. How can this extremely unjust system of power relationships reproduce and replicate itself over decades and over centuries and over millennia with such an extraordinary disarming ease? Wittig's answer is simple, clear and sharp. It works so well because the socio-economic origin of the hierarchical partition of the humankind into men and women is hidden and thus legitimized by a specific essentialist ideology whose key category is sexual difference. Wittig named this system of thought the straight mind, in which the adjective straight weaves together the notion of normality, of heterosexuality, but also whiteness. The straight mind is the ideology that supports the belief according to which men and women, heterosexual and non-heterosexual, but also non-racialized and racialized groups, would be natural groups. I quote Wittig: "Sexes, gender, difference between the sexes, man, woman, race, black, white, nature, are the core of the straight mind's parameters. They have shaped our concepts, our laws, our institutions, all our histories." And as Wittig shows in her essay, The Literary Workshop, posthumously published in 2010, these categories also violently shape our bodies and our minds in a tyrannical way. Bodies and minds of men and women are asymmetrically constructed by the straight mind system of categories, becoming social injunction, since they are backed by the whole social order. affirming, as the whole social order does, that women and men have an identity by essence or biological determinism, means assigning women and men different and asymmetrical places in the social order. The straight mind's categories have a specific effect. They create for each individual a tendency to acquire the capacities and the incapacities which are a priori attributed to the sex group to which a given individual is assigned. In a total reversal of cause and effect, this acquired system of capacities and incapacities will retrospectively be understood by the society as arising from the presumed sexual nature of the individual and not from the social relations of domination creating the sex groups. In these ways, men and women are fabricated and naturalized. Denaturalizing them, as Wittig's theory does, has two main political consequences. First, showing that the categories man and woman and the groups that correspond to these categories, men and women, are very solidly built. And second, unveiling that despite their solidity, these categories and these groups are not eternal. Wittig's theory causes vertigo. Or better, Wittig's theory is like trying on a new pair of glasses. It changes the way we see the world. Becoming aware of the fact that the oppression we suffer is solid, but not irresistible. Becoming aware that the master house can be destroyed is extremely powerful, as it opens for oppressed groups a new form of agency which did not exist before. Wittig's theory is like carrying a new weapon. It gives us the proper tools, not the master's one, to dismantle the master's straight house by showing us exactly what materials it is made of. This political effect of empowerment does explain why the holders of power positions in our heteropatriarchal racist order do not cease attacking anti-essentialist, feminist and queer theories and critical race theories that denaturalize the sexual and the racial order. They accuse these theories of being not only militant and unscientific, but also intolerant, totalitarian, and therefore highly dangerous. The latest version of this long-lasting struggle is the recent global crusade led by reactionary groups against what they call woke ideology or cancel culture. In a sense, these reactionary actors are right. Feminist and queer and critical race theorists are dangerous. If they do not want to destroy the world, for sure they want to destroy the straight world. We do want to destroy the straight world. And to do that, I quote Wittig again, the transformation of social and economical relations is necessary, but it's not enough. What is also needed is, I quote, a political transformation of words, notions, concepts. Wittig was a writer. She named herself a minoritarian writer to refer to the fact that as a woman and as a lesbian, and the same it's true for non-white people, she was a non-expected subject in literature, in politics, in science. She had to enter the literary, the political, the scientific fields, I quote her, by force and obliquely. During her entire life, Wittig was leading an ongoing struggle with language in order to destroy the category of sex. For that matter, Wittig imagined new pronouns, new bodies, new minds for the characters of her novels. In 1964, Wittig published her first book, The Opoponax. This book narrates the conquest of a lesbian subjectivity in childhood. The title refers to something that does not exist, that is frightening. It is the name that the young protagonist gives herself when she discovers that she's in love with her schoolmate. The pronoun I is used only at the end of the book. Previously, everything is said through the indefinite and genderless pronoun one. Wittig's second novel, The Guerrière, published in 1969, 1 year before the eruption of the women's liberation movement in France, is an epic one, already imagining the overthrow of the patriarchal order. The title is a neologism referring to a group of guerrilla fighters. As in the previous book, the protagonist is a pronoun, not the genderless one, but the French plural feminine pronoun, elle. In the book, elle is generalized, universalized, and it refers to a new they that would express new subjectivities existing in a world to come, where the category of sex does not operate anymore. In 1973, the lyric poem The Lesbian Body narrates the amorous and sexual encounters of two lesbian characters, indicated with the pronouns I and you. The pronoun I, je in French, is graphically cut into two parts by a slash, je. Je is the pronominal form invented by Wittig to refer to the experience of minoritarian subjects when they speak or when they write in a world which does not consider them as subjects, but rather as objects. In 1975, a French publishing house asked Wittig to write a feminist dictionary. A few months later, Wittig came back with a utopian book, written together with her beloved partner, theater and film director Sande Zeigt, whose English title was Lesbian People, Material for a Dictionary. Wittig and Zeigt reacted to the invisibilization of lesbians and lesbian culture, joyfully reinventing a past that has completely been swept away by the heteropatriarchal regime. 10 years later, in 1985, Wittig published two more works, the novel Across the Acheron and the play The Constant Journey, two feminist and lesbian reworkings of respectively Dante's Divine Comedy and Cervantes' Don Quixote. They constitute two new opportunities to describe the hell of heterosexuality and to imagine the unthinkable of a world where the category of sex would be obsolete. Like Audre Lorde, literature for Wittig is not a luxury, but I quote her, a site of action, forcing the language to say what it is not constructed to say. In Wittig novels, language is forced to speak of de-heterosexualized bodies and minds, of lesbians fugitives from their own class sex, of cross-border subjects who illustrate that the borders separating the two sexes are historical and as such can be shifted, altered, twisted. The strength of Wittig's literary utopias, Wittig used the word utopia as a synonym of imagination, is twofold. On one hand, it allows us to understand that the world in which we live is not the only one possible. There are alternatives. And on the other, it makes us vividly see what new worlds could be. If Wittig could be such a radical theorist, it's because she was such a powerful utopian. Wittig could denaturalize the category of sex because she could imagine a world in which the category of sex was obsolete. To conclude, I'd like to quote a passage from The Guerrière, conveying this power of utopia, explaining that when all resources are lacking, the feminist and lesbian imagination is there to make us breathe. I quote, "There was a time when you were not a slave. Remember that. You walked alone, full of laughter. You bathed, bare-bellied. You say you have lost all recollection of this time. Remember." The wild roses flower in the woods. Your hand is torn on the bushes. Gathering mulberries and strawberries you refresh yourself with. You say there are no words to describe this time where you were not a slave. You say it does not exist, but remember, make an effort to remember, or failing that, invent. Thank you very much for your attention, and keep reading the feed.
My turn.
Yes, we continue with you.
You've been amazing, and I don't need that, but I might need water.
Shall we put on the first slide with Asli's name, maybe? Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Sara. That was amazing and super inspiring, and I really feel inadequate right now following you, but I'm going to do my best. First of all, I want to thank the organizers and especially Mika for inviting me. This is my first time here with this community and also in Vienna, and it's really amazing. It's a great pleasure to be here honoring the legacy of one of the most interesting minds of the 20th century, Emma Goldman. Well, her controversial thoughts and debatable political methods aside, I think within the context of exile, and that was actually what Mika wanted me to talk about, the experience of exile and how it cross-pollinates with other issues like precarity and subjectivity. Well, within the context of exile, I think we shall remember Emma Goldman first and foremost for her resilience, her defiance, and her restless desire to challenge all the boundaries that were set in front of a woman and an oppositional thinker of her time. And these are indeed not qualities that are easy to maintain, and nor do they automatically come with challenging situations like exile. So today, departing from that point, I would like to reflect upon what exile does to you as an individual, and I'm going to do this in view of the illuminating insights of another slightly more famous exiled person, Karl Marx, and as a significantly less famous but more contemporary case of exile myself, I think I can reaffirm some of those insights through my own experiences. You know, this is what I love about exile. It gives you the feeling that you have something in common with people like Karl Marx or Emma Goldman, especially when you're a little delusional or a bit tipsy. I mean, I had a glass of wine with lunch, so I'm allowed to, you know, draw some parallels between myself and Karl Marx. For example, just like me, Marx also has had two different stages of exile. First, he was in Paris very briefly between 1843 and 1845. Then, after the Prussian ambassador pressed the French government, he had to leave. He moved to London and then spent the rest of his days in London. Now, I think it's very important to note before I start talking about Marx that Marx never romanticized exile, unlike other contemporary exiled scholars of his time. He was a very practical, rational person with clear goals and disillusioned expectations. One of the many qualities he had in common with me, obviously. He did not expect to find the paradise lost in Paris, nor did I ever expect to find anything remotely resembling a paradise in Berlin. Jesus Christ. He only went to Paris to escape the Prussian censorship and to work on his writings in peace. And this he did spectacularly. He did not hang out in literary salons or within the cultural networks of exiled scholars. He hung out in workers' meetings because that was what he was interested in. And indeed, he found a much larger proletarian community in Paris than he could find in any German city of that time. Now, as a typical example of how exile makes you a better person, this brief exchange with the French society has brought about a major evolution in Marxist thinking. Luckily, it transformed him from a Hegelian into a historical materialist and ultimately a communist. In fact, he reframed the Hegelian concept of alienation in view of the French working population in the slums. And two of his major works, the Economic and Philosophical Manuscripts of 1844 and the Holy Family of 1845, came out of this brief period in Paris. You know, I'd like to think of it as similar to how my book came out of my brief exile period in Italy. You know, we have so much in common. It's uncanny, really. I mean, you'll see. But unlike me, Marx never focused on exile as a research venue. He did, however, observe with sharp wit and a dark humor the patterns of human behavior in exile. In a, well, mostly forgotten, posthumously published text titled Heroes of the Exile, Marx gives out a brilliant sketch of the German emigres in 1850s in London. And he takes the reader on a journey of, you know, the diasporic community of that time, which included figures like Gottfried Kinkel, Gustav Struve, Arnold Ruge, Karl Heinzen, Haro Haring, and a bunch of less noteworthy arrivals, as Marx calls them. But in this satirical portrayal of a certain milieu, you do not only find individual stories of exile, but actually a critical reflection upon how vulnerability and precarity might prompt a toxic environment of destructive competition. Now, unfortunately, Marx's detractors often tend to interpret Heroes of the Exile as a vindictive attempt at bashing the people that Marx didn't like. I mean, personally, I wouldn't have any problem with that. I mean, nothing would give me more pleasure than to see Marx at the same level of pettiness that I am. But still, it would be unfair to classify Heroes of the Exile as a malicious attempt at character assassination, because that's not what it was about. What Marx tried to show through this text was rather how even the most banal human traits, which could have gone unnoticed under normal circumstances, like, for example, narcissism in the case of Gottfried Kinkel, or ignorance in the case of Karl Heinzen, envy in the case of Arnold Ruge, or opportunism in the case of Haro Haring, can become explosive under extraordinary and politically dangerous situations like exile. Now, for Marx, or for anyone who's ever been a part of an intellectual diasporic community, these figures that Marx mentions in Heroes of the Exile are not worth mentioning just because Marx had a personal beef with them, but because they are symptomatic characters, as Marx describes them. Their stories reflect the sociopolitical pitfalls of diasporic communities in general. We see, for example, in Heroes of the Exile, how a mediocre poet at best and a conservative Republican like Gottfried Kinkel could be marketized as a revolutionary literary personality or the greatest men from Germany of that time, which was, of course, nonsense, and Marx called out on it. And this case actually shows that exile is, and already was in the 19th century, an industry. And we have to face that. It is an industry. And people can be marketized as something else that they weren't before they came to exile. And despite his critical distance, Marx himself had become an object of interest for that industry at times. Now, as a more contemporary case of exile myself, I can sadly confirm that it still holds true. Exile is, of course, an industry. But I have to say that the interviews that are being conducted with exiled people like myself at this moment are significantly less interesting and spectacular as compared to, for example, the interviews that had been conducted with Marx in mid-19th century. They had such flashy titles. I get jealous. Like, I get endlessly jealous. Like, for example, there was this interview in the Chicago Tribune from 1879, and it had the title, Interview with the Cornerstone of Modern Socialism, Or there was this other interview in New York World, I guess a couple years later, where the reporter starts with the words, "I'm sitting tete-a-tete with revolution incarnate." I mean, of course Marx was all that, but no one has ever written something like this about me. At least not yet. But if you're a woman, and there's a silver lining, if you're a woman, chances are at least that your interviews will be spiced up with physical details about you that have absolutely nothing to do with your political stance whatsoever. And by that, we shall remember the interviews that had been conducted with Emma Goldman in our time, whereby she was described as having a shapely head, but an ugly smile reminiscent of snakes. I mean, fortunately, the German press has been much kinder with me, I have to say that. Like, I mean, I would have died if anyone had written something like this about me. But I remember one interview, I guess it was in Der Spiegel, and the reporter had described me as anger must sit deep within her because it's barely perceptible behind her calm green eyes and her soft voice. I read that. I read that and I was like, I must have been on some heavy painkillers that day. I mean, no one has ever described me as calm. But that was what she wanted to see, probably. But you know, I mean, when you're in exile, people get interested in you. And sometimes even in your political opinions, even though you're a woman, and that's obviously the least interesting part about you. You know, they invite you to panels, they invite you to give talks, at least for the first 5-6 years of your exile period, because after that, your market value gradually decreases, pretty much in the spirit of the Marxian tendency of the profit rates to fall. And when that happens, I mean, when your profit rates start to decline, some people might resort to some cheap tactics. For example, as Marx demonstrates in the case of Arnold Ruge, the urge to rebuild your life and your career in exile might prompt some questionable publication practices like plagiarism, self-plagiarism, duplicate publications out of the same set of data, etc. Of course, none of us would do such a thing. Or it might prompt, even worse, questionable political patronage relationships like the one Arnold Ruge had going on with Giuseppe Mazzini. Now, you can criticize the current risk industry, you know, the current risk scholarships and institutions that are helping displaced scholars like myself for a lot of reasons. And I did, and I still do criticize them for a lot of things. But I have to grant them one thing. They have at least saved displaced scholars like myself from seeking refuge under the wings of dubious figures like Giuseppe Mazzini, and that's more than a lot. I mean, long story short, exile can do a lot of things to you on a personal level. It can turn you into an opportunist, like those figures that Marx described in Heroes of the Exile, or it can make you hilariously sarcastic, like Marx, or it can make you dead inside and numb you to all human sentiments, like me, and it certainly traps you into long lines of ennui and very brief stops of ecstatic vitality, pretty much how Marx had been described in an Intel report from 1853 written by a Prussian secret agent. And here I would like to read a little snippet from it to give you an idea of what exile does to you as a person. He likes to get drunk. First of all, I'm sure he didn't like to get drunk. I'm sure he only liked the taste of it. He's often idle for days on end, but when he has work to do, he will work day and night with tireless endurance. I read that and I thought, I feel seen and personally attacked at this point. I continue. For him, there is no such thing as a fixed time for sleeping and waking. He will often stay up the whole night and then lie down on the sofa, fully dressed around midday, and then sleep till evening, untroubled by the fact that the whole world comes and goes through his room. Now, this is just a description of anyone who's working on a manuscript with a tight deadline. I mean, that's not just Marx, right? I mean, and when I first came across this secret agent report, I was working on a manuscript myself. And I read that and I'm like, it suddenly occurred to me, I'm literally Marx. I have the same circadian rhythm. I'm in exile. I have a political economy approach. I'm a Marxist, although Marx himself had a problem with those who called themselves Marxists, but that was because he never met me. But I check all the other boxes. And it just puzzles me that no one has discovered the genius in me in all these 6 years that I spent in exile. I'm not even appreciated in my own time. Nothing says genius like that. I hope it will come one day. But all jokes aside, all in all, I think exile probably does one thing to you as an individual, and that might be the only thing that I have in common with people like Emma Goldman and Karl Marx. Once you're expelled from the one life you built, you feel like, you stand there at the crossroads and you think to yourself, I have nothing to look back on or forward to anymore, unless you dust yourself up and create meaning again on your own. Because your past has now been erased, forcefully, and your future lies under such a thick fog that you can't possibly see ahead. And your entire life has been reduced to one single present moment. And that present moment is full of meaningless drudgeries. I said it many times on different occasions, and I'm going to say it again. There is absolutely nothing romantic about life in exile. Life in exile is all about running errands all the time. It's about getting a residence permit. It's about finding an apartment. It's about convincing your old conservative Eastern German neighbors that you're not some ill-mannered, uneducated Untermensch just because you're coming from Turkey. It's about finding a gynecologist. It's about finding a job, which is practically impossible if you're in academia and if you're in Germany, the land of short-term scholarships. Short-term scholarships are all you'll ever get in Germany, where 92% of the entire academic workforce works on fixed-term contracts, and there's no tenure for no one, basically. But all in all, what I'm saying is, life in exile is more mundanely chaotic than romantically anarchistic. And that mundane chaos is actually best described in that Intel report when the Prussian spy describes the heart-wrenching poverty and negligence that reigned in Marx's house. And here I would like to read another little excerpt from it to give you an idea of how life in exile really looks. There is not one clean and solid piece of furniture to be found in the whole apartment. Everything is broken, tattered, and torn. There's a thick coat of dust everywhere too the greatest disorder. When you enter Marx's room, smoke and tobacco fumes make your eyes water so badly that you think for a moment that you're groping about in a cave. Gradually, your eyes become accustomed to the fog, and you can make out a few objects. Everything is dirty and covered with dust. It is positively dangerous to sit down. Now, ladies and gentlemen, in a less trivial sense, I would say, this is basically what life in exile is like. It's a life where everything is tattered and torn, covered with a thick coat of dust, the dust of your past that is now out of your reach, obviously. And in exile, too, it is positively dangerous to sit down, because you're literally hanging by a thread in every sense, occupationally, legally, emotionally, financially. And the moment you lean down and try to sit down, you might fall into a bottomless pit. So you have to stay in a survival mode, and you have to stay hyper-vigilant at all times. But otherwise, it's fun. Exile is really fun. Although, obviously, I have lost my ability to have actual fun myself. And by that, you should fathom also that I did not have as many and passionate love affairs in exile as our beloved Emma Goldman did. It's the 21st century. People are frigid, and libidinal energies are dead. And also, I spent most of my exile years in Berlin, where all human desires die. That was the worst part of exile. But other than that, it's fun. You find yourself in interesting situations. For example, in my first year in exile, and I was in Berlin, I had been approached by a lot of homeless people on the street, and not just to ask for money, they seemed to want to strike a conversation with me. And after a couple times, it occurred to me, oh, they must sense that I'm about to join their ranks soon, you know? What else is there as an occupational path for a non-tenured sociologist in Germany? And I found myself pondering whether I could use my hardcover copy of Das Kapital as a weapon of self-defense when I start to live on the streets, you know. And I'm saying when, because it's only a question of time for a non-tenured researcher in Germany. But it's really fun. I mean, and all jokes aside, over time, either by the compassion that is being brought towards you by the homeless people, or through your own observations of the domestic academic precariat in your host country, you realize one thing. You realize that exile is nothing, I mean the term exile, is nothing but an empty signifier. It only serves two purposes. First, it gives you the false impression that you might have some distinctive advantage over other displaced people and precarious lives, which you don't and which you shouldn't have. And second, it creates a quarantine zone. It creates a labor market bubble, and it separates you from the domestic academic precariat by virtue of that bubble. But you do actually have a very similar labor market position with the domestic academic precariat, and you should organize with them. And the moment you realize this one simple truth, your mind enters a different zone, the zone of expanded sensibilities and expanded possibilities, the zone where you convene with other precarious and nomadic lives. And you stand there and you think to yourself, currently 89.3 million people are displaced. And even the traditionally most secure career paths, like the academic one, are being brutally flexibilized and precarized. So your subjectivity cannot be possibly space, title, or profession-based. In the 21st century, we are all nomads. And I'm saying this both literally and figuratively in the sense of fluid identities and paradigmatic shifts. And to come to terms with this sociopolitical reality, we need a nomadic view. And a good starting point in this regard would be to redefine subjectivity with an open-ended and relational vision as put by Rosi Braidotti. What Rosi Braidotti had in mind when she was talking about this type of subjectivity was a subjectivity that is not based on sameness or stability, but is based on what the negative and the disruptive can reactivate in all of us. And what they can reactivate in all of us is the lost connection between will and desire, or the lost connection between the desire and the knowledge of desire to exist, as expressed in the Spinozian term of conatus. In Spinoza's thoughts, conatus is the source of all free action. It's the act of endeavoring to persist in one's being and resist destruction. For Spinoza, for this reason, physical existence and the desire to sustain that physical existence, that is, the body and the mind, cannot be separated or set against one another. Considering that the universe and all the living beings in it are preconditioned to sustain their existence, there can be no discrepancy between the universal logic and the actions of all living beings in the universe. There can be no contradiction between desire and the knowledge of desire. There can be no antagonism between emotion and reason. As in the words of Spinoza himself, will and understanding are one and the same. Now, if you juxtapose that line of thinking with the experience of exile or any disruptive experience, you get a very interesting picture. Because we often experience such disruptions like exile in life as crisis. And in a lot of senses, it is what they are. It is a crisis situation, of course, at least at first. Then you get jaded. But there's the beauty of dialectics. Exactly for this reason, such disruptions also have the potential to reactivate defiant conatus. Do you know what you feel the first in exile, the first thing that you feel in exile is anger, deep, burning anger. You want to kill people. And I know whom I want to kill, actually, specifically. But I'm not going to name names to make it even harder for me to go back to Turkey. But you feel deep anger. Anger over being violated in your willpower. Anger over having to leave the one life that you had built. Anger over even the simplest things, like not being able to find your favorite cookie in exile, or the fact that you forgot your favorite book. And anger over your own powerlessness. Because in exile, you're a nobody. Your whole life depends on the goodwill of other people, and it's a very hard pill to swallow. It really makes you sick inside, knowing that you can't do anything and you're just dependent on other people's goodwill. But exactly for this reason, exile is also a lesson in the inherent vulnerability of human life and our mutual interdependency as species with all its curses and blessings. And that may be the only thing that makes exile an interesting storyline that gives you the feeling that you might have something in common with spectacular personalities like Emma Goldman and Karl Marx. Not because you as an individual are great and destined for greatness since the day of your conception, but actually in this one little instance, your life story now combines the unique and the universal. Unique because your life story is now a fragment of the zeitgeist of a certain epoch, and universal because it's a story, it's a tale of the two main traits of our species being, that is vulnerability and conatus. And only when you realize, when you notice within your seemingly personal disaster, the reflection of this human vulnerability and mutual interdependencies, that your life story becomes a story worth telling. Thank you.
Thank you, Asli. Thank you, Sara. I think those were two stories that combined the personal and the political, as feminists are very prone to do, in very wonderful ways. So thank you very much. Now we will start the award ceremony. And we'll start with the Snowball Awards 2022. Those are people that are nominated by the Emma Goldman Awardees of last year. And they know who they are. They even know each other. They have met online. And we're here to celebrate them. The FLAX Foundation is a young foundation. And maybe it will forever remain a young foundation because it's not set up for eternity. It's bound to historical material limitations. But we know for sure that we can exist for 5 years, probably a little bit longer, but maybe not that much longer. And so we have been set up, and you can check it on the website, because we do not like the way that academia honors its best scholars. Because it sets up competitions as if you can find the one and only best person. And we think that's ridiculous. You can't. You can identify good people. You can identify very good people. But how to, I'll ask this question again, after I've presented 2 of these people. How would you compare these 2? People work on different teams, under very different circumstances, so how in heaven can you ever compare them and then decide who is the best? We think that's a fiction. And because we think that's a fiction, we've also not made a competition. So we have followed the example of the Genius Awards in the US, where people are nominated by boards and unknown others who identify very good people, who then have an award thrown at them. And then they can make a plan what to do with it, not before. Then they can make a plan from the certainty that the award is coming. We think that saves a lot of energy, also for the board actually, because otherwise we would have to spend a lot of money, like paying a committee or something to meet, or whatever. So it's not good. It has worked well in the past. And then the second is that if you don't do that, then you run the risk that you only tap into your own networks. So we ask people far and around us who are not in Europe. The Emma Goldman Awards are for people in Europe, wherever they come from. So if we ask experts outside of Europe, we're safe. No, those people are not eligible anyway. So they don't compete with themselves in that sense. Or we ask also previous awardees to tap into their wider networks and expand our ideas. But also we have the Snowball Awards as one way of expanding our networks. So anyone who receives an Emma Goldman Award can nominate a person that they know. It can be someone working in the teams that they work. It can be on another team that they have always been bothered that there's not more people working on this. Whatever reason. We've had awardees in the past that went on a search because they thought Europe is really too small. Even we tried to expand, at least to the east of Europe and beyond the European Union. But then we had an awardee who thought like, but actually like what happens in Belarus, I'm gonna find someone there. And she went on a quest and a research trajectory until she found someone. Right? So this is how we expand our networks. But most of the people that are nominated are known somehow. So when I present the Snowball awardees, I will do that in the order alphabetically of the first name of the people. So you know if your first name is with a Z, you'll have to wait a little bit, no? Because we're going to start with the A for sure. So I will also mention who nominated you, right? Because it's also an honor to be nominated by great people. So, and I have the awards right here, and they're not in the right order for some reason. So I will wait a little bit until I have the right one now. Because I will start with Adriana. And if I call your name, so please come here, so that people see who you are. You can also stand a bit higher. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's therapeutic, right? We know that most of you are so busy doing the good stuff you do that you forget to think how good you are. So this is why the awards are there, for sure. So Adriana Zaharevich, and we put your names there so that people can remember your name a little bit easier, is nominated by Anna Miszkowska-Kajewska, who's also been a fellow at the Institute in the past, and who's not from Serbia as you are, but from Northern Macedonia. And you're both an activist and an academic. And this is something you have in common with many of the awardees. You used to participate in the activities of Women and Black, the key and most radical anti-nationalist and anti-war Belgrade group, and was involved in the Belgrade Center for Women's Studies and also the Zagreb Center for Women's Studies. Besides her academic publications, she contributes to the website Pečanik, which is the oppositional website in Serbia, read all over the post-Yugoslav region regarding nationalism, women's rights, gender issues, racism, workers' rights, anti-corruption. And she's one of the few and far between people addressing political divisions within feminism, such as, for instance, also the political divisions between Belgrade and Pristina feminists. And you can see her co-edited volume on the enemy figure. That's on Serbian, so we should all expand our language capacities, or we should look at Adriana and ask, whatever. So her edited volume on feminism, it's called Somebody Said Feminism, How Feminism Influenced Women in the 21st Century, only available in Serbian too, has become a main introductory textbook to feminism in the post-Yugoslav region. She's now translating her own book on Judith Butler's political philosophy to English. It's nice, no, how that goes, no? Butler writes in English, then bright people in Serbia think about it, write a book about it in Serbian, and then other people think like, I want to read that too. So, and then you have to translate it in English, otherwise they don't read it. You work at one of the very few institutes in Serbia, the Institute for Philosophy and Social Theory, that have managed to stay critical and independent. And that means that although she has tenure there, her position is precarious because the position of the institute will always be precarious under the current political circumstances. So, in recognition of your contribution, your engagement, and your future potential, Adriana, I congratulate you on behalf of the board with your award. Isn't it inspiring? No?
Very much. Thank you very much.
But also for the other people. You see, well, you know, these people don't give up. These people continue. These people address difficult subjects. These people combine stuff. These people translate. So you will start to see a pattern when I introduce the next people. So, Edna Martinez, can I call you? You're nominated by Stefanie Boulila, so I'm sure you know that's no mean feat also. Asli, I'm sorry to say, she's from Berlin right now. But she's gonna leave Berlin soon, so maybe that creates a connection. Yeah. So Edna Martinez is an activist and scholar based in Berlin. She received her PhD from Berlin, the Freie Universität in Berlin, I think, with a dissertation on the precarious lives of black people in frontier territories in Colombia and Ecuador, and the palm oil industry. And you're from Colombia, originally, no? Yeah. So, she's an activist for various organizations that support women migrants. She's worked for Women in Exile in Berlin. Have you ever been there? Yeah. A feminist refugee women's collective, and has been the chair of LAFI, a Berlin-based NGO that organizes public talk and workshops on gender migration and decolonization. She also, many of these people were going to surprise you, she also teaches boxing, you know, boxing, and self-defense to black people and women of color in Berlin, being quite a good boxer herself. And as a frequent guest at Deutsche Welle, an international German television station, where she provides critical commentary on political issues. There's too many political issues that need commentary, no? Yeah. In an academic system that's still invested in policing the boundaries between scholarship and activism, Edna's scholarly work has not received the attention it deserves. Whether that's German, I think is a bit broader than that. We do believe that the German academic system cannot afford to lose any more radical feminist scholars like her. We congratulate you with your award. It's amazing how I mess up this alphabet. Hannah? Yes. Okay, now for something different again. Hannah Fitch is a very committed critical neuroscience researcher, combining nominated by Annalise Keizer-Trujillo, who's sitting here somewhere, because she's a fellow at the Institute this month. Combining German perseverance with a good way of knowing when the rules must be broken to realize solidarity in academic and activist feminism. She knows what precarity means for many, many years. She's active academically, but her PhD also has a film as part of it, testifying that she works at the intersection of scientific and artistic practices. She studied sociology, biopsychology, and new media at Goethe University in Frankfurt am Main, earned her PhD at the Technical University in Berlin on visibilities and sayabilities. I like that word. Sometimes I think I'm not the only one inventing words, but could be. In functional magnetic resonance imaging. She's teaching at the Center for Interdisciplinary Women and Gender Studies in Berlin, holds a postdoc position with her current project, How Bodies Turn into Numbers and Numbers into Images, on algorithms in brain research and the logic of standardization. She's planning to work on feminist and communist utopias. Remember or invent, you said, no? What it is that make people work against sexism, racism, and classism, and what are the hopes that keep us going. So, Hannah Fitch, on behalf of the board, congratulations with your award. All these people are amazing. I think you will agree with me, no? So I'm calling Ina Mikhaili. Ina, you're nominated by Meraf Amir, who's also been a fellow at the Institute in April this year, I think, no? And Ina is a feminist researcher, scholar, writer, and activist who works at the intersection of gender and sexual politics, economic inequalities, anti-colonial politics, and migration. Maybe a bit more, but yeah. I have to say that for anything that's coming or in the past, if I forgot something, is because, you know, I try to keep it short. And you can edit all this text later, no? For the website of the foundation. We didn't want to bother you before. Her political writing is an original and powerful feminist voice on a range of pressing and contested social issues, be it on lesbian gender politics, self-care in feminist movements, anti-Semitism, and Palestine, which often reaches hearts and minds in compelling ways. Ina's book on women's economic empowerment, feminism, neoliberalism, and the state, from last year, is based on her magna cum laude doctoral dissertation from Humboldt University in Berlin again. There is some kind of, we can't help it. Apparently, there must be something good with that city. No? So this book contributes to understanding the complexities of women's empowerment in political and national contexts that continue to disempower racialized and migrant women along the lines of gender, race, ethnicity, and class. Her academic work places women's agency as a key source of knowledge. In her doctorate, she focused on women's grassroots organizations in the global field of women's economic empowerment. Her feminist activism started when she was 17, or maybe before, but that I don't know, because she moderated the first Hebrew language LGBT youth online community, who became a crucial support and connection space for Israeli queer youth. In 2004, she co-founded a project of feminist and political education by and for migrant women. And since 2019, she serves in the position of Director of Programs at EWIT, a global feminist organization that supports feminist movement worldwide in strategic ways, from research and knowledge building to cross-movement connections and advocacy. And like many of the other people, but I can't say that for everyone, no, because many nomads among the awardees. We want someone to investigate that at some point. Why is it that so many of these people move around so much? So Ina is based in Berlin, Germany, raised in Haifa, Palestine, Israel, and born in St. Petersburg, Russia. On behalf of the board, recognition of your contribution, engagement, and future potential, I'm happy to give you the award. Yeah, there is a degree to which some of these people move around quite a lot. I think because they have to find the opportunities where they are, something like that. Or they have no choice but going somewhere, no? Yeah, so Maya, can I call you here? Maya de Leo. Maya de Leo has been nominated by Sara Garbagnoli, who's actually here. Because we like to take some of our speakers from our pool of awardees from the past. So Maya de Leo is queering history as a queer historian. She's nominated for her impressive work as both an academic and a lesbian activist. Her PhD is in history from the University of Pisa, with a thesis on representations of lesbianism in the 19th and 20th centuries that won the 3rd edition of the Maria Baiocchi Prize and the prize of the Equal Opportunities Committee of the University of Pisa. To have these 2 prizes for one thing is like a bit much, maybe, no? Deserved, I think. So her research focuses on the cultural history of LGBTQI+ communities and queer theories. And she has published a lot in the journals Storica, Genesis, Snowdy. So you can see she's very Italian. It's a big country. And in the volumes, I'm not sure with my Italian, Identità e rappresentazione di genere in Italia tra 8 e 900, and Homo sapiens, per una sociologia della omosessualità. She taught gender history in Geneva and is currently teaching in Torino, right, at university. And in 2018, the opening of this course of the history of homosexuality, the first of its kind in Italy. I'm sure you are kind of aware of the dominance of right-wing politics in Italy, maybe? This course has faced brutal attacks by right-wing political groups. So sometimes we think we need to balance this out a little bit. Her recent book, Queer, Storia culturale della comunità LGBT+, from last year has been a huge publishing success, so that's wonderful. While Italy is still this country strongly marked by sexism, homophobia, lesbophobia, and transphobia, her work is a vital reference point for the whole community. So, recognition of all your work, Maya. Happy to give you the award. Okay. Let's move to Sandrine Vergès. Another nomad is standing in front of you. Sandrine Vergès is a French philosopher, nominated by Ingrid Robijns, who's a Belgian philosopher working in the Netherlands. And she teaches at the University of Bilkent in Turkey. She teaches feminist philosophy there. And that the circumstances for atheist philosophers to do work in Turkey become increasingly difficult needs, I think, no further explanation. She does both work on the history of philosophy and contemporary political philosophy, and in both advances feminist topics as well as uncovering the world of female philosophers. This has a special place in your mind, no? She made female philosophers more visible even those that are not feminists, no? By writing articles about their work, and also, for instance, in the case of the work of Sophie de Grouchy, published the first French-English annotated translation of Sophie's letters on sympathy. I think Sophie's husband, the Marquis de Condorcet, is more well known, and I don't know why.
We're changing that.
I don't know why. But her work has been neglected, and you're trying to counterbalance that. In terms of academic activism, she is an active member of Project Vox and the New Narratives Project, international groups that are striving to reintroduce important texts by women philosophers into teaching and research. And she's the co-founder of the Turkish European Network for the Study of Women Philosophers, and so the Turkish chapter of this. And on her personal website, she's not boxing. But on her personal website, you can find artwork by her, drawings and aquarelle, no?
Yes. Yeah,
Waxing might have come in more handy in Turkey.
Yeah, but yeah. So if you're interested in that, there is a freely downloadable yearly calendar of women philosophers there, drawn by Sandrine Berges. So, in recognition of everything, Sandrine, here's your Snowball Award. Yeah. Okay, if your name is Sarina, then you're the last one. Yeah, so I said before, all these people are nominated by someone, no? And these people then write letters to the board like, oh, I know, this is such a wonderful person. Yeah. I can't repeat that all the time, but you're nominated by Rosalind Cavagan, who had an award last year. And you are a rare combination of feminist climate change and race equality activist, based in Scotland and England, and worked with a range of organizations all over the UK. And for the last 10 years, Sarine has worked to involve minority ethnic women in knowledge building and policy influencing around climate change agendas in Scotland and England, challenging assumptions that I think you can imagine in government, that ethnic minority communities are not interested in that. So Sarina pushes environmental groups to take an intersectional perspective, and she pushes women and intersectional organizations to engage with climate change. And we know, the director also mentioned, all these current times, we know that this is needed. We cannot be these single issue scholars or activists. It's not how the world works at the moment. So in her own activism, Sarina facilitates minority ethnic women in generating climate change solutions using participatory approaches and an intersectional analysis, and building on existing multi-generational knowledge on sustainability and global justice within their communities. This type of work is hardly facilitated, as most funding, you probably know, is project-focused or linked to ready-made policy solutions and does not ensure that community knowledge is used. So in contrast, Sarina has long-standing experience in engaging with communities that white-dominated organizations have difficulty reaching, and is deeply committed to both building the capacities of other activists and elevating the status attributed to knowledge from these communities in the wider society. She's also run a leadership academy for minority ethnic women, and using creative methods like visual art. There's you can talk among yourself maybe, and creative computer simulations. So with all these, I think Sarina makes a unique contribution to not just knowledge capacity building, policy influencing on climate change and racial equality in Scotland, but beyond. So to help with the beyond is also one of the reasons that this award is given to you. And we're very happy to do that. Yeah, this is mine. I'm going to take the next batch of awards, right? And this will not go in the same type of alphabetical order. So you can prepare yourself, because we will do it in reverse alphabetical order, starting with the first name again. So, I mean, you have a little bit of time then to get used to the idea that you have to come up. And I for sure will have mixed them up again, so that will give you a bit more time. So I want to start with Tony Hastrup. Very nice. Okay, does it say Tony Hastrup? Yes. Okay, you see Tony Hastrup. She's a professor in international politics at the University of Stirling. A graduate from, I think you're another nomad. A graduate from California for the BA, Cape Town for the MA, Edinburgh for the PhD. Her research interests center around gender, global security, sustainable development goals, decolonial thinking, ontological security, feminist approaches to international studies, including foreign policy, Africa-EU relations, and building an anti-racist political science in Europe. Because I met her there recently at a conference in July. So her research broadly explores the nature of global power hierarchies between the global north and the south in knowledge and practice. She has worked in the area of global governance of security via regional security institutions like the African and European Unions. I like that. No? European Union is simply just another union. No? In that kind of sentence. It decenters, if you hear it like that. A part of her current research agenda draws on critical feminisms to understand the foreign policy practices of both institutions. And in addition to research and teaching on gender and international security issues, she sometimes, actually quite often, offers media commentary and advice to international organizations like the World Bank and the European Union. Until summer, she was editor-in-chief of the highly valued Journal of Common Market Studies. She has and has had multiple board roles in her field, including the wonderful, I'm not going to tell anything more about it because you can all Google it, Women Also Know Stuff. She's an active co-organizer of sessions and workshops, is very active in what she calls public-facing scholarship. So I don't know if you invented that phrase yourself, but I do like it a lot, must say. And she's an excellent and frequently invited speaker. So, honoring your substantial contribution, engagement, and your future potential, we're very happy on behalf of the board to give you this award. We have another tea. I see some tea. Come here. Yeah. Tatev Hovhannishan. I can see it. Yes. I think Hovhannishan is not so difficult.
Whoa, great.
It's just, I stumbled a bit. No? Tatev Hovhannishan is a very bright and bold Armenian feminist investigative journalist, and the first journalist that we give an Emma Goldman Award to. Because we think because we have come to realized that academics, they leave a lot of stuff that they don't look at. And then other people are doing that who don't get the credentials for that. So we wanted to change that a bit. She's currently working as Eurasian editor of the Tracking the Backlash project of Open Democracy. In her work, as an investigative journalist, she generates powerful storytelling that challenges power and inspires change. She produces data-driven, gender-sensitive work countering disinformation and democratic challenges. Not just on gender. One example of that is she collaborated on investigating the very large private sector funding for all-party parliamentary groups in the UK. So this is the money and the politics line, which, I don't know, academics, what they do with it? Not much, often. Why? We don't know.
Most of them are civil servants.
Not always, no? Yeah, but I mean, we can discuss that over a drink. This year she was invited to speak for the European Parliament, gave a course on journalism in Oxford, was part of this year's Evans Foundation Journalism Prize jury in Brussels, and participated in academic conferences such as the Sevilla 22 Conference on Democratization, Gender Plus and Exclusion Policies, organized within the framework of a John Monroe grant by Spanish College, and we met there. Her writing has appeared in many international media outlets like the BBC, Euronews, The Guardian, Mother Jones. She was interviewed for the iconic MS magazine. She has a background in Oriental Studies and journalism, masters 5 languages, English, Russian, Armenian, Arabic, Hebrew. She's developing a network of freelance journalists in the region too. So you can see, no? Who should we compare these people to? It's not possible. Is she very good? Yes. Should we compare Tony and Tatev? It doesn't make any sense. Is Tony very good too? Yes. Okay. Very happy to give you the award.
Thank you.
That's the idea. Yeah, we do hope that the embarrassment for the people who get it, when the talk is about themselves, gets a bit easier to I don't know, when you hear all the other people, no? Good. Patricia Zanoni, can I call you up here? Patricia Zanoni, professor in Hasselt in Belgium, but also research fellow in Leuven in Belgium, and also chair in organization studies at Utrecht University in the Netherlands. She is one of the driving forces in the scholarly community of critical management studies, and is one of those keeping the attention for class inequality alive in this discipline that is always tempted to lean in with neoliberal capitalism. With a background in economics, anthropology, and diplomatic sciences, you discover stuff when you think you know a colleague, when you read their CVs. She's highly committed to research on diversity and discrimination, precarity, technology and alternative economies, and interdisciplinary theory. She received multiple awards for papers, for her dissertation, and for innovation in education. I think the latest is that actually, today, there is a start of the master in Utrecht, of a master course that is officially now called Organizing for Social Impact. I think the activist in the room can think what that means and talk to her about the curriculum. Her latest funded research collaborative, I think, often, no, we know that. You don't do stuff alone. Is on humans in digital logistics, other work on datification technology as technonormative control, and on work in the Amazon warehouse. She interrogates the capitalist organization of the economy and society through the pandemic, varieties of ableism in work context, racializing diversity. She's most definitely not an ivory tower academic, and she doesn't shy away from editorial duties, from pushing for better teaching and teaching conditions, from speaking to various kinds of practitioners, and from producing reports for policymakers, mostly for multiple layers of the complex Belgian governance system, but also for the OECD. And then all the other things you can ask her that I didn't tell you. Patricia, I'm very honored to give you this.
Thank you.
We have some M's coming. Definitely. I start with Massimo Prearo. I think some people would think you're the token man, no? What can we do? No? You're a rare bird. Well, that's all we can say. Massimo Prearo is a researcher at the University of Verona in Italy and co-chair of the Italian Political Science, Gender and Politics Standing Group. He has a French dissertation at the EHS and Habilitation, and with his background, he's better known in the Roman language parts of Europe until now. Until now. It's meant to change. Linked to his influential book publications in Italian and French. He's working mostly on anti-gender movements at the moment, but also was very active in research on LGBTI migrants and asylum seekers and sexual equality politics more broadly. He's one of the most knowledgeable scholars on the role of the Vatican and varieties of Catholicism. See how nuanced he is, no? Not just Catholicism, but varieties of it. On anti-gender campaigns in Europe, and active in the academic community that works on religion and politics and on issues of family politics and gender. And in this, he succeeded in showing how Vatican politics are linked with the wider anti-gender camp, in which both conservative neo-Catholic movement and gender-critical feminists have played key roles. And I cannot tell you more about this book because I have to wait for the translation of this famous book that is until now only available in Italian. But any Italian I asked, told me that I had to read this book. But I think it's faster if I wait for the English translation. And you are also a prolific translator between the French, the Italian, and the English language domains for research articles in the field, showing your service to the community that comes very naturally to you. And so there is interviews in English that you can find where he talks about the book. Otherwise, I wouldn't have known also what it is about. Massimo, enjoy your award. You deserved it. On behalf of the board, here it is. Yeah. Marina, can I call you up? It's Marina Shestova. She came from Helsinki to this award ceremony, but it's not totally where she's from. She's a Ukrainian political scientist and LGBT rights activist with an interdisciplinary background in international economic relations, gender studies, psychology, and political science. I mean, it's a lot. She just started a position at the Aleksanteri Institute at the Finnish Center for Russian and Eastern European Studies in Helsinki after moving around. Wonder why? From Ukraine, from Kiev and Dnipro to Turkey, USA, Sweden, Ljubljana, and Belgium. She's proficient in many major European languages, such as Russian and Ukrainian, English, Spanish, Italian, and a bit of German, Swedish, and Slovenian. Just a bit. Her research centers on sexual diversity and equality, homophobia, migration, democratization and social struggle in Ukraine, and in the wider Eastern and Central European region, and Turkey. She published books and articles on LGBTI politics in Ukraine and Turkey, on civil society activism in Ukraine, on religion, nation, state and anti-gender politics in Ukraine and Georgia. She also published on authoritarian regimes and protests during the pandemic, on EU-Russian relations and the Ukrainian conflict, and on COVID-19 and commercial surrogacy in Ukraine. Most of all, also, she's involved in 3 academic or semi-academic initiatives helping researchers from Ukraine. Ukrainian Global Scholars, Ukrainian Global University, and Science for Ukraine, for which she is the coordinator. So she's a highly driven, very committed scholar. And we're very happy to give you the award. I have 2 more awards to give. And for sure, we can drink to it, no? Madeleine, can I ask you, Madeleine, babe, pap. She says there's multiple ways. Yeah. Came all the way from Australia. At some point, no? She's a senior researcher at the Institute of Sports Science at the University of Lausanne. We had someone that was in boxing. Madeleine is inclusion specialist for the International Olympic Committee. And that's also because she was an Olympic athlete. But she's also a highly valued and very talented and committed scholar. And she's contributed this double position to public and policy discussions about whether and how to regulate eligibility in elite women's sports, writing and speaking in a wide range of media outlets. With a background in political and social inquiry from Australia, Monash, I think, and sociology in Wisconsin-Madison in the US, she examines the knowledge politics associated with gender equity projects in sports and biomedicine. So I think some of the people here will find some connection there. Specifically, she examines how ideas about biological sex difference are at times produced rather than challenged by the pursuit of the equitable representation of women as athletes or as participants in biomedical research enterprise. By examining how policymakers and scientists and certain feminists seek to enact sex, she shows how this sex emerges as elusive and ambiguous and always entangled with gender, race, nation, and other socially meaningful forms of difference. She recently published on gender in automated facial analysis as an extended colonial project, on the enactment of sex as biological variable in US biomedicine, on trans justice and speech rights, and on sex as a biological variable in animal research. So you can see, she looks young, maybe she is. That's maybe why. But she's already covering a lot of ground in her work. So I wish you good luck with this award and congratulations on behalf of the board. Okay, the last one you did. Can I call you up? Hi. Judith Takacs is from Hungary, came by train today, and she's research professor at the Institute of Sociology of the Hungarian Academy of Science, one of the few places where independent research can still be done. Her main research interests cover family practices, childlessness, caring masculinities, social history of homosexuality, homophobia, and gender phobia. She has degrees not just from Hungary, but you have a degree in history from Budapest, in social sciences from Amsterdam, and a PhD in sociology and a diploma habilitationis and Doctor of Science title from the Hungarian Academy of Sciences. Her work has received multiple awards already, And her most recent publications include an edited volume on paradoxical right-wing sexual politics in Europe, a book chapter on post-communist queer necrophilia. I'm tempting you with titles, right? And you're gonna look that up. And co-authored articles on liberating pathologization. We need a drink. The historical background of the 1961 decriminalization of homosexuality in Hungary, and democracy deficit and homophobic divergence in 21st century Europe. It's not easy, the context in which you do your research, and you just keep going on. So you surely, with all the work you do and all you have achieved, deserve this award. Very happy to give it to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So, if you're an awardee, I have some envelopes that can make it a bit easier to hang around with your awards at the drinks. Maybe I should have said that before. And yeah, thank you, Hannah. So, thank you all for staying with us tonight, the people here in the room and the people online. I'm sure there must have been some of the awardees that were speaking to you. As in, I would like to know more about this person. They're in the public domain. You can find their work. And they're here in person. So if you're here in person, you can also stay for a drink and bother them with your questions. So we would encourage you to do that, because we will all enjoy that. You've seen how they seem to not be angry about this award. No, they seem to be happy with it. So I think without further ado, it was a long session, no? We will take off the microphones and go down. But the people who won an award have to hang around a little bit here because, you know, we need the glam photos for the website. And at the end of the drinks, it will be maybe more difficult, no? So maybe before the drinks, we will have better photos, no? Because, so it's just, it will not take long. We have a very, very good professional photographer here. Yeah, okay?
Mika, thank you very much. Thank you for doing such a sterling job. And I'd now like to reiterate your invitation, not just to the recipients of the awards, but to everyone here. If you'd like to go downstairs, not only is there wine, there is lovely food as well, our legendary flying dinner here at the IWM, in which an outside caterer, a restaurant, comes and provides food for us. So please, you're all welcome downstairs. Thank you. Thank you.